This week on By the Numbers, here on our free segment on YouTube, join us as we look at the housing starts numbers and how it's impacting builder confidence. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join us as we take you through the numbers. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Lindsay.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm good. Did you have a good weekend?
I had a nice weekend. Well, a little rainy and dreary, and we had severe weather warnings here. A tornado watch, actually, in southern New Hampshire, which is not frequent for us.
No, and I don't know about you, but it was right in the middle of nap time for us.
Oh, no.
So I was like, we're not going to the basement. We're just going to look out the window and hope to goodness that it doesn't happen and disturb nap time.
That's a good plan.
Yeah, it was a break in what we've had otherwise nice weather here.
It has been. Yes.
I went from a golf lesson last week. I'm a professional now, so
Perfect.
Watch out. In like 95 degrees, I think it was.
Goodness.
But and then to kind of chilly and rainy this weekend. So not too fun.
I'll take it. I mean, we are based in New Hampshire, and there's a reason I live in New Hampshire. It is because I don't do well in 90 plus degree heat. So I know elsewhere in the country, some of you are saying that's nothing, but for us up here, it's tough.
Yes, we're a distributed workforce, so we have colleagues all over the country, and I know that our colleagues down in Texas are rolling their eyes at us right now.
I think they might be.
But hey, they get to rub it in our face when there's snow up here.
That's true. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not unlike our headlines for the week, it is a little bit dreary as well.
It is. Yes, that's a good segue.
Yeah, so we'll jump right into it. But here we are talking about the housing market again. But it's relevant. There's numbers that come out. We have to talk about them. So
yes, and we got kind of a doozy for the May numbers. So a lot of headlines out there. And I know this is somewhat self-serving for you that we do keep going to the housing market. But as you said, it's top of mind for so many people right now who are looking to buy, to sell, to move, to stay put, just want to know where their house valuation is and really what's going on in that market.
Right, exactly. So the headline for today to start our conversation is housing starts dropped 19.3% in May as builder confidence continues to slide. With the Federal Reserve making no clear commitment to when an interest rate cut may come, home builders are scaling back. In May, privately owned housing starts fell to a seasonally adjusted rate of 1.277 million units, which was down 5.5% month over month and 19.3% compared to a year ago. So typically when we're reading these articles, I'm looking a little bit for that gotcha moment, something to allow you to speak to, some discrepancies within the article. I think this article did a really great job of avoiding what we typically call out when talking about month over month. We want to look at a little bit of a longer duration. This article gave us month over month and an annualized figure.
It did. And again, you mentioned the discrepancy in numbers. Some of our numbers will be a little bit different because we prefer to look at not seasonally adjusted data in our housing starts view. So I calculated the same numbers. Housing starts in May came in at 116,000 units started. That was down 5.2% from April and 19.9% from the year ago level. So right within the ballpark of the numbers you just gave.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, they emphasized that a couple times throughout the article about seasonally adjusted.
Yes.
So what is that seasonal adjustment with regards to how they were looking at it as opposed to how we look at it?
Exactly. So seasonal adjustment, we've talked about this before in terms of GDP.
Right.
And you'll see that frequently in data sources. Seasonally adjusted or SAAR is the other way, seasonally adjusted at annual rates, you'll see sometimes. Essentially what they're doing in this case, you quoted a number that was a little bit over 1 million, and I quoted a number just over 100,000. What they're looking at is for how typically how May's average numbers flow with regard to the rest of the year. So what slice of the wedge essentially is that May month.
Okay.
They're looking at that kind of normal piece of the pie and extrapolating if what happened in this month matched that kind of normal seasonal adjustment factor, what would we see for the whole year? So that's why you had a number that was about 12 times what we would see, right?
Yeah.
Again, given a little bit of leeway for a seasonal adjustment factor. But that isn't how we tend to look at things. As we talk about so much, a lot of economics is cyclical, right? We see the pendulum swing, we see it swing back. We very rarely see just a linear trend play out for a year. And so that's why I prefer to look at just, okay, what was the absolute number in May, not what would this mean for an entire year if it came in for 12 months consistently.
Okay, so that makes sense. That 1.277 million was a hypothetical if the year continued on like May.
Exactly. And so they'll quote something like that every month, but that doesn't mean 1.2 million units were started in May and then started again in June or whatever.
And what did you have for May starts?
So the number of starts in just the month of May, 116,900 starts.
Okay, and that's still down though.
That is still down.
Right.
So again, they're year over year, month over month comparisons, take out a little bit of that seasonal adjustment factor. But it really was ballpark as we see the trend flowing.
Yeah, so this is kind of talking about builder confidence in the beginning here. And I think with regards to starts, this is one big number. So what goes into starts? Multifamily, single family?
Yes, you hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
So as we talk about housing starts, most individuals who are probably homeowners, we tend to just default in our brains to the single unit market because that's what you're looking at right now, right?
Yep.
One single standalone home. Maybe I'm a little biased because I do live in rural New Hampshire instead of in a big city where I would default to like a condo or a townhouse as my frame of reference. But in this case, I think the headline, not to say it's deceptive, it's absolutely true, but it really could have been better at pointing out that the negativity we see is centered in multi-units.
Okay.
The number of single units started in April were 95,900, and that did drop to about 90,000 in May, so down 6.2% month over month. But that was following 3 months of rise. So we had been seeing single unit starts on the increase. On a 112 basis, or the May number compared to 1 year ago, that was down just 2.8%. But once we back out of just this one single month of data, when, as we always say, weather could impact this trend if you just delay, breaking ground until the next month because it's been weird weather.
Yeah.
A lot of things like labor availability can influence month-to-month decisions, just weird kind of quirks of timing. So if we take a 12 over 12 rate of change, the most recent 12 months compared to the year ago level, single unit housing starts are up 13.9%.
Wow.
And that's in phase B of the business cycle.
Okay, so single family is in a growth phase.
Yes.
Accelerated growth phase, rather.
It is, yes. Again,
And
May came in a little soft, but the general trend is still very, very positive.
Okay, but that's being overshadowed by this multifamily decline being more heavily weighted to the multifamily decline.
Exactly. So multi-units, again, the number of starts dropped in May from 27,400 in April to 26,900 in May. So that's down just 1.8%. It's actually a smaller month-to-month tick down.
Yeah.
But on a 12-12 basis, multifamily is in phase D, our recession phase of the business cycle. Their 12-12 rate of change is negative 30.1%. And so phase D means that number is negative and still dropping. We haven't reached the bottom quite yet.
Yikes.
Yeah. And the 112, by the way, in May was down 49.6%. So coming off a very strong last May to a relatively soft this May.
There was this quote that I pulled out because I had a chuckle when I read it, so I thought I'd share it here today. Builders are in a if you build it, they won't come market, as continued high mortgage rates keep more potential buyers out of the market. So I think that says exactly what we were just talking about there is does this project make sense?
Exactly. And on an overall basis, not just single or multi-units, but overall housing starts, we find that mortgage rates on an inverted scale, so obviously higher mortgage rates are bad, so we flip the scale.
Okay.
It leads housing starts by about 7 months on average. So there is that very clear influence. If we do see some decline in mortgage rates, could have some stimulative effect.
To more building.
To more building.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense because then there'd be more people looking to get into the market. And I do kind of feel like, and this is not an accurate forecast, just a little bit of a gut. And from what I've been experiencing out there looking for myself, I feel like if that's going to happen, it's going to almost be like a switch effect. People are just going to run to the markets. And I almost think, I know we talk about it just being, 25 basis points, and that's not actually going to make you feel that much different. But I think that the psyche behind it is going to kind of catapult some more buyers into the market. So I'll let you talk about that from a realistic standpoint. That's just kind of my gut feeling.
I agree with you. We just human beings have such mental accounting that, I mean, that's why there's a whole industry around targeting sales, right?
Yeah.
And targeting, is it better to, have X% off or a dollar value, right? There's so much psyche in there in the good, better, best model. And I think you're right. I think individuals really will react maybe in an exaggerated way to, as we said, the Federal Reserve forecasted doing only 25 basis points of cut this year. That's symbolic. That's not going to really move the needle on cost, but we'll feel a little bit better. So maybe we will take action.
Yeah. So back to the article itself, though, with regards to, this was talking about starts, and then it kind of takes a turn into permits.
Yes.
So talk to us about the difference between looking at starts versus permits. What different picture does that paint?
So the biggest difference is just in terms of timing, right? You have to pull the permit before you can break ground and count the start. So we do find, and again, we can see this vary from single unit to multi-unit, even region to region, we'll see very slightly different lead times. But essentially, permits are a view of what's coming next. It's not what's happening today, but it's a great leading indicator.
Okay, so the permits are a leading indicator to the starts.
Exactly.
And then this takes it another step further, and it talks about completion.
Yes.
So those are looking at 3 layers of what contributes to how we forecast the market. But my question was, I know we've talked a lot about permits. We've talked a lot about starts. I know that we look at that data for a number of our clients, and constructions where we can kind of get a little bit more granular with our database.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've heard us talk a lot about completions. Do we have data on completions?
We do have data. We don't typically talk about it, typically because, and maybe this is something of a coincidence, just where our clients happen to be. But I know you and I personally talk to many more firms in, say, the construction sector than in, I don't know, home furnishing, right? Someone who's waiting for that house to be completed, waiting for someone to move in. And even then, completions can really be influenced by, like we talked about, labor availability. If you can't get the crew on site, your project will take longer. It's going to be longer to completion. So some of those normal cycles can be extended or compressed based on other, again, weather factors, things like that. But either way, housing starts give you more visibility. So even those folks, right? I have some clients in the furniture sector or counters and cabinets.
Yeah.
They still look at housing starts because they're getting more visibility to see, and even permits in that case, if you want to see even further into the future.
Yes.
So we do track it. It's interesting, but I think a couple other compounding factors that are taking away from the question we're trying to answer.
Yeah. So I think it depends on, what leg of the race you're kind of looking at this from. It sounds like single family is a little bit of a beacon of hope. In fact, this other quote that I have here says, builders continue to add to the inventory count. In May, single family home completions were still roughly 1% higher than a year ago, with more homes coming on the market and no equally large uptick in housing sales. Total for sale housing inventory is higher than it was a year ago. And that was from a senior economist at Zillow. So that, if you kind of take this housing starts and break it out, I would say it sounds like a beacon of hope for the housing market.
It does start with the overall housing stock before we get into the single multi kind of breakdown.
Okay.
On a 112 basis. So again, getting back to just how low was that May number, every one of our 4 main regions of the country, the 112 rate of change were all negative. So in the South, which is the biggest region on a total number of houses basis, the 112 was negative 16.9%. The West down 9.2%. Midwest down huge 41.4% in the month of May from last May.
And this is overall housing.
Overall housing.
Okay.
Both single and multi, but here in New England, down 20.5%. Excuse me, the Northeast, not New England.
Northeast. Wow.
So that's when we really have to rank these things, and in terms of where is the single units maybe positive or a little bit less negative being dragged down by that real contraction in multi.
Yeah.
So I have an absolute data dump here for you, Lindsay, but we'll pull out the important pieces of it. So I wanted to look a little bit more broadly because especially when we're talking about regions in just 1 month, like I said, we had a tornado warning here this weekend. No one was starting work on a new house. So I looked at the 12-12 basis. So again, that annual growth rate. In the South, which is again the largest region on a housing stock basis, their 12-12 was a positive 0.2%. So positive, but by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah, right.
Very slight rise.
Very slight.
But the difference here to me was pretty stark. Single units were up 12.7%, whereas multi-units were down 26.1%.
Oh, yeah. So definitely
A real switch, right? But again, a lot more space typically. If you just think of kind of the breakdown of that region, that southern
right.
region.
They might not need to go up.
You might not need to go up, at least right
it
now.
may not be safe to go up too if it's tornado warning. I mean, the tornado warning was in New Hampshire, but
That's true.
Down there, the weather.
I'm going to ask my colleague who's in Oklahoma City, and
Yes.
we'll see. The West actually had the highest 12-12. That was, again, by the skin of their teeth. It was a positive 0.4%.
That was the highest?
That was the highest. That's our bright shining spot in the data.
Oh, dear.
But a great 12-12 rate of change for single family, positive 27.5%.
Oh, okay.
Against multi, down 32.4%.
Oh, yeah. So it's the multi
It's
is
multi
kind of the
dragging it.
black sheep here.
And we see in the other two regions, the Midwest and the Northeast, both of those were negative on a 12-12 basis. Midwest down 6.4%. And here as well, even more stark, single unit starts were up 7.9%, but multi-units down 28.2%. And in the Northeast, which was down overall, this is, by the way, the smallest region of the breakdown.
Right.
Down 23.3%. Our single unit starts were down 4%, and multi were down 41.3%. So a pretty big drop.
That's a huge difference between those two.
It's a big
too.
difference.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is the smallest region of the country. We had just 1.8 million multi-starts in the 12 months through May. So it's a much smaller number. It's easier to see those much greater swings in terms
Okay,
of
yeah.
percentages.
That's fair.
But I guess all 1.8 million of those were on our seacoast in New Hampshire.
Yeah, seriously. And perhaps in one town specifically.
Yikes.
That's all the time we have for today here on our free segment on YouTube. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to subscribe to our full-length episodes, click the link in the description below. But for now, have a great day. Until next time. Bye, Lauren.
Bye, Lindsay.